It is 7 o'clock in Sydney, 5 p.m. in New York, because that's where we begin with our continuing coverage regarding the indictment of the former US President Donald Trump. The first time it has ever happened in history. Let's go to our Washington correspondent, Annalise Nielsen, on the ground. Annalise, bring us up to speed. A morning of history.
It has been. Donald Trump is now the first US president in history to face a criminal conviction. He came here to Lower Manhattan to the criminal court where he was formally arraigned. In that process, he had his fingerprints taken, but we understand there was no mugshot taken of the former president. Then he was led into court and had the formal arraignment unsealed from the grand jury. Now, this is a grand jury indictment. As we've said repeatedly, they vote after secret hearings to decide whether there was any charge to answer. In this case, they have decided on 34 counts.
Donald Trump was arraigned on a New York Supreme Court indictment returned by a Manhattan grand jury on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. Under New York state law, it is a felony to falsify business records with intent to defraud and an intent to conceal another crime. That is exactly what this case is about.
Pete, we're getting more information around exactly what these allegations involve. We know it's this $130,000 hush money payment to Stormy Daniels in the lead up to the 2016 election, but these payments allegedly came through until 2017. The question here is how the money was paid and whether it was mislabeled as being a campaign financing issue. That makes it a felony, and this is one of the issues here we've seen with these potential charges. These are now actual charges. They're Class E felonies. Now, that's the lowest possible level of a felony you can have in New York. It means that there's no indication that there's anything violent around it, and that means that it's very unlikely there would be any kind of prison term attached to it if he is found guilty, but that doesn't mean it's not incredibly hard to prove. And when we're talking about a low-level amount, this $130,000, it's not necessarily the kind of thing that would go on a radar of a district attorney. What they've said in this instance is that this could have been used to hide a more serious crime, which then elevates it.
In my remarks, I mentioned a couple of laws, which I will highlight again now. The first is New York state election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. I further indicated a number of unlawful means, including more additional false statements, including statements that were planned to be made to tax authorities. I also noted the federal election law cap on contribution limits.
And then one of the aspects that we've received more clarification on is the idea of this breaching campaign financing laws. Now, that would be a very serious issue. It could breach federal laws at that pace, and it could also exceed the threshold of campaign donations if it was characterised as such. But from what we know from these charges that have been released in the indictment, it doesn't seem that that is the case.
Yeah, that's about it. There's one other important fact, and that is Trump paid for this out of his own pocket. He in no way used campaign funds. Now, there are campaign accounts where people donate to it and you're raising money. It's strictly regulated. He did not use campaign funds. It was only his own personal money.
Pete, Donald Trump came and left from court very quickly. He left here and immediately went to LaGuardia Airport to fly down to Florida. There was a group of supporters of the former president who came to show their support. There was a much larger group who came to show their support for the indictment. That's not unexpected when you're in such a blue area. But this is the question for Republicans especially. How is this going to play out in the long term? And no one really knows. A lot of it will be defined by what Donald Trump says in his speech tonight.
Yeah, and his speech is coming up in a few hours' time, Annalise. We'll bring up that live shot for you. Annalise has been there, by the way, folks. She's been to Mar-a-Lago. She's seen it firsthand. There's inside there. So in the next few hours, it's going to be a full house when Donald Trump speaks later on. Just one more question I've got for you, Annalise, because Alvin Bragg referred to this so-called catch and kill during his press conference, which was interesting. And this is the actual concept of buying and suppressing negative information that could influence an election. I mean, if that's what the prosecution is relying on. Is that why it's only regarded as Class E felony?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't unexpected in any political arena. I think any campaign, especially with as much on the line as a presidential election campaign. Remember in 2020, Biden's campaign was $1 billion. Trump's was just under $1 billion. It's about as high stakes as it gets. The question is, how was it recorded? You can pay people to not talk about stuff. That's totally allowed. Yeah. The question is, did you lie about it? Did you put this on your business records and say that it was legal advice when you knew it wasn't? That's what will get people in trouble, and that's what they're going after in this instance. But even at its highest level, it is still, as a first-time offence, potentially for Donald Trump on the very low scheme of things.
Yep, very low indeed. I think you put it right earlier, Annalise, as you always do, but essentially you're mislabeling things here. I mean, for a US president to have all of this before him, to be indicted in court for essentially mislabeling something, I mean, people are going to judge on this and assume that this is just politically motivated and the justice system has totally been weaponised.
Well, I mean, it's one thing to call it mislabeling. I mean, if you or I mislabel something on our tax returns, we get in trouble.
Sure.
This is a lot of financial reporting is very strict around these rules, but the fact that the time that's passed also, I think that's one of the big questions here. And when they had the information and then also the witnesses, this is going to be their big issue. Michael Cohen's been doing the media rounds, doing interviews about this. Stormy Daniels has her own credibility issues in the general public, and so it's not just going to be the slam dunk unless you do have some other factors coming into play.
Yep, and the next in-person hearing, December 4.